A lot of things can change in 5 years. Back in 2019, which was, at the time of recording this, was 5 years ago, I started a series where I had the idea of showcasing photo mods from various different games. I had a small list that I wanted to work with, and then over time I decided to expand the list. I browsed through the web, I collected games that had options to take screenshots in game, and maybe with different options included. You could maybe do like a stage set or completely different surroundings around various different things. I'm generalizing the description of photo mods, I understand, but back then, at least when I was looking around, it was kind of hard to pinpoint out what a photo mod is and what could count as a photo mod. But it's 2024 now, and the list of videos that I've created back then are next to worthless now. I've decided to delete all of them and create a video on explaining why I've decided to get rid of, I think it was 43 different videos. So 5 years ago I started a series where I talk about photo mods. Simple idea, a very basic execution. I would buy the game, I would play the game to the point where you get into the photo mode, maybe even finish the game depending on how long the game it takes to finish. Talk about how easy it is to use, how difficult it is to use, how much options are there to choose from, and if there are any alternatives for that specific game. In some cases, these photo mods were built-in features. In some cases, you needed a third-party tool. In some cases, there was no photo mod, but there was something similar that you could use as a photo mod. So really, there were just 3 real options for photo mods. Now it's 2024, and I think those 3 options are still there for newer games. But the problem is that I ended up not keeping up with the series. So even on its own, the series ended up being dated. And over time, the less I really cared to follow the series, the more dated it became. Live service games, for example, were one of those examples where you would start out with the game, you would make photo mod video on it, and then comes a patch later down the line and half of the things you mentioned might not be relevant whatsoever after that patch. In cases like Forza Horizon 4, I've mentioned how at the time of making the video, that photo mod feels unpolished, especially when you compare it to what you had in Forza Horizon 3. So I did the video, I've edited it, I've uploaded it, and a few months later I've started to play Forza Horizon 4 again, and yeah, that features that were in Horizon 3, they implemented it in Horizon 4. So in that case, it's just the simple fact that most games that come out don't really carry over every feature that they had previously if they are a sequel, and over time they just patch up the game to have as much features as the previous ones had. So those who enter the game later down the line, they actually get a more feature-heavy version of the game. By those who initially bought the game, they are just kind of becoming, I guess, a tester. Early access player, even though it's in the case of Forza that shouldn't be the case. But that is just one problem with live service games. The other problem is when the games are either hard to find, hard to track down, or they are not even available anymore. In the case of The Crew, for example, come 2024, the game is getting shut down, and in a way that you cannot even play it unless someone will mod in the offline mode. I guess there's actual backlash around that series because there's now a movement that uses The Crew as an example. People are actually fighting against live service games now, which is an interesting thing, and I agree, it sucks. Live service games are way too common these days, and everything feels like that it's gonna be a live service game with no actual plan to keep the game around once it finishes, and The Crew is a good example. But you look at another game like GT Sport, and that game got unlisted, but they actually patched in a single player patch for it, so you can actually play the game if you have it. So what about single-player games? They shouldn't be affected by the same problems that live service games have, right?
Whenever you're using this game and mod it, and the game receives an update, depending on how many mods you have downloaded, you might have to wait for the script extender to be updated to match the game's current version. then you will have to wait for some mods to be updated for the script extenders version. I sometimes had to wait 2 weeks. The game itself has a lot of bugs, the game has a poor optimization, even in 2019 they fixed nothing about it, they just add paid content into it, and I feel bad that I have to mention this so many times in a freaking photo mod video.
War never changes.
Even single-player games are affected. There was one game, A Hat in Time, that I've originally made a video for, and then they released a DLC for it, and I had to redo the entire video. Go back to the game, see how the new photo mode plays out in comparison, and then mention the differences between the two versions. Now, in some cases where live service games get shut down, most of the offline components end up playable. And if there are games that are mostly single player heavy but they have multiplayer options, once they go offline, they should work as a single player game, right? In the case of Need for Speed The Run, people actually mentioned that after the multiplayer of the game got shut down, people couldn't access the photo mode feature of it whatsoever. That's another video that got completely useless as time went on. Now what about third-party solutions, like using mods for games? There was the Cinematic Tools series that was covering a few Electronic Arts titles, like Battlefield 1. What about that series? Well, when I made the videos, it had a website. That's no longer the case. The author just simply didn't want to keep the website up. Now he shares his mods on Twitter. Or X. So I guess that aged somewhat alright. Just need to find his Twitter, I guess. But in other cases, when I would mention a mod, a few years later there would be another mod that does things way better, making my initial video outdated and useless. Well, I guess in the case of Fallout 4 you can still access both mods, so it's just an example of, well, now you have more options. But in the case of Skyrim, while yes, you can pretty much access the console commands on PC for both versions, Special Edition now has a photo mod created for it, and it's pretty much the same mod that has been made for Fallout 4 as well. More options, I guess. But my video ultimately is now outdated. In the case of third-party methods like NVIDIA's Anzio feature, you access Anzio by using NVIDIA GeForce Experience. And GeForce Experience is about to be replaced with another app. So pretty much every video where I mention NVIDIA Anzio, people either scratch their heads not knowing what Anzio is because they don't use it, or they will scratch their heads because I'm talking about an app that is either about to be replaced or has been already replaced. So I'm guessing you already see the pattern here. And that is that making videos about photo mods is somewhat of a time capsule situation. You make a video at that one point, you state what is available at that one point, and you either have to remake the video if you really care about it down the line to update what has changed, or just accept the fact that your video is outdated, and you will get people mentioning that over time. But the other problem that I had with this series was the fact that I started a series that I didn't realize how far would go. As I mentioned, I've made 43 videos on this topic alone. There was even one episode which specifically talks about websites and applications related to photo mods. And guess what? Pretty much none of those applications or websites are available anymore. NVIDIA had the Shot with GeForce website. That's no longer available. Forza had the Forza Hub. That app doesn't work anymore. You can't even find it on the Microsoft Store. I made 43 videos, but since then I bet there's at least just as many games released that have a photo mod, that if I would still do this series, I would need to buy it, I would need to play it to get to that certain point where you can access the photo mod. I would need to compare it to all of the other photo mods out there just to meet the standards that I've set out for myself. Thing is, I don't really care anymore. I don't really want to buy another 43 games just to see how that one specific feature that most players don't even care about, how well is the hint feature executed. So on that note, I think it's time to pull the plug on this series. Outside of the fact that they are a time capsule, I don't think there's much reason to keep them around.